workshop on drafting a robot manifesto. I'm going to make this very quick. I just want to give a bit of a rough outline. I don't know, who of you hasn't heard our presentation here before? Ah, okay, they're even, oh, perfect, they're nearly the whole room, awesome. So then, no, because in the other session before, we had some other people that had been at the workshop before, and we were somehow, the rough outline, we were repeating that, so perfect. I think we can condense the timeline a bit though, so I will make you hope, but in general what we planned is, I'm going to do a very short introduction. I want to tell you what this is all about and why we think that we should look into a robot manifesto. Then we would like to go into a group work. Actually, it was intended to do 3 groups. I don't know if it makes sense to make 2 groups, so we make 1 big group. We're going to see how well it goes, and I think, and we have some questions prepared for you. And because this is now not a workshop with a lot of speakers, but one where we really want to get some hands-on. I want to start with something that you often see in the press, or at least I get asked every time if I talk to a journalist, which is, when do finally Asimov's law apply? And can we use them now, and what do we do with those? And I know in the session before, Ellen and Andrea were already tapping on that they're right now completely useless for our community, because the robotics that we do, we don't have fully autonomous robots that can think for themselves, so actually they can't be applied. But what do we apply in between till we one day, maybe in 60 or 100 years, or maybe never, get smart and self-thinking machines? So currently there are many different parties working on robot ethics, like in South Korea, or the ethics on artificial intelligence, and the code of ethics for the human-robot interaction profession, and so on and so on and so on. And Alan was in the other session also hinting at that. He also said that at the same time there are also a lot of ethical codes of conduct developing. So there are more and more organizations pushing out some documents, and we think that at least the robotics community should try to find a common ground on what we would like to see and what we wouldn't like to see with robots. We also had the discussion before that the difficulty in that is, first of all, to start with what is a robot? What are we talking about? What kinds of robots? Industrial robots, service robots, robots at home, big robots, small robots, robots with legs, whatever. But all that said, I think we definitely need at least a common understanding of and a position on what do we want and what do we not want to see in robotics. And I think this is achievable. So, why do we believe in self-regulation? Well, we think that normal regulation has some issues, especially if you put it first. And I also want to hint at Alan's way. Sorry that I bring Alan Winfield up so much, but he just gave a great talk 2 hours ago. And actually he developed and published a model how you can get from self-regulation and a common understanding over standardization, then to legal regulation. And I agree. I think, but what we have to do first is actually we have to meet on common ground. Then we have to think on what we would like to see and what we wouldn't like to see. We have to involve all the stakeholders and all the stakeholder groups, so not just the robotics community, but also groups outside of that, especially industry, policymakers, but also the general public. We have to properly inform them about the current state of robotics, because we still have a lot of misunderstanding there, because the people in the streets are either completely overexcited about robotics, like, oh, we're gonna have a service robot like in Star Trek in 2 years, or they're completely afraid because they believe that the Terminator is going to kill them in 2 years, or robots are taking away their jobs and all that. And all these techno-populist opinions are, to my understanding, not really what we need. What we need is we have to explain to them what robotics is, what robotics can do, when will be what available, and then we should discuss about, do they really want that? So, for example, I can tell you my parents don't want a household robot, although I'm working at KUKA for consumer robotics. they openly tell me they will never buy whatever I come up with. So, well, yeah, we have a lot of nice discussions over the coffee table that they tell me, yeah, that's nice what you do, and maybe there's a market and a lot of people might need that and it might make lives better, but if you get one to our home, we're gonna drown it in the garden pond. Yeah, well. So, then the other disadvantage or the challenge in regulation is usually how do we come up with something that, at least if it's not legal regulation, how do we come up with something that does not finish at the German border, you know, German, Austrian, whatever, that is really something uniquely for Europe, or maybe ideally if we have a lighthouse function with the ERF, maybe even for the world, because I know a lot of other organizations are also looking into that, IEEE, Asian organization and so on. So I think if we do it right now, then we can really become more or less the forefront and the lighthouse for these topics. And there are usually some cases, especially right now in the beginning of robotics, that haven't been discussed before. So, as I already said, I believe that we have to involve all stakeholder groups. This will also be a discussion which stakeholder groups are there. But as I said, I believe science, research, industry, so the robotics community anyways, policymakers, then the unions, and also the general public. Did I forget some? Well, be sure I did. So and this will also be a question, whom should we talk with? But I think we should start with the robotics community as an incubation chamber and move from there. So what do we think that a robot manifesto should be? Well, we want to come up with as much of a common understanding of a code of conduct that the robotics community thinks we should follow. And again, Alan put this up. He said the problem really is that there are now, even if we talk about robotic or robotic or AI governance or ethical governance or however you want to call this, if companies start to apply that, they wouldn't even know which code of conduct to adjourn to, because there are several out there, they all differ fundamentally. So I think it would be great if the European Robotics Foundation or the European Robotics AESBL could agree on one opinion there. So, yeah. Again, a voluntary set of rules for the development of technologies in the field of robotics and AI. I think we also have to discuss how those two go together, but well, at least in this community, I definitely see a physical representation for the machines that we're talking about. But on the other hand, it also, we're talking about smart and learning machines and the combination with AI. So, but I do not know, and we can put that up for discussion later, if we're only talking about software, so software assistance and learning systems, because I feel a bit, but that's just my personal opinion, I'm a bit critical about that, because that is usually where a lot of misconceptions come from, especially in the media, when people start just talking about chatbots and whatever, and then they call them robots, and people think of the Terminator or whatever. So, and then this should be the basis for at least at the beginning self-regulation, and then so my hope would be that when we reach such a robot manifesto, and forgive me, I'm a computer scientist, I believe it has to be a prime number of rules, but we're going to work on that. So 7.3, 7.13, whatever laws of robotics, that then companies and yeah, well, you're laughing. That is important for geeks, you know. So when we reach that subset, then hopefully that we can get people to agree. And at least in some discussions with our CEO, he once told me that if that is something that also the community is really backing up, then he will be willing to back that from a KUKA point of view. I also get, surely not, that people already said, yeah, okay, I give you my signature without reading it, but and so also other competitors of ours signalized that they would be definitely interested in knowing about something like that if the community would decide on that. So, yeah. So, why should we do that? Well, again, and you might know my take on this, I believe that latest our grandchildren will grow up as Generation R of robotic natives, like digital natives today, there will be a generation that is surrounded by automation technology. And we're developing that technology, and I think it shouldn't happen like with the internet, because the internet actually, yeah, it really just happened. It was never intended for watching cat videos on the go to the bus or something like that. And people can't live without it anymore. And it had really big socio-cultural and socio-political, socio-economic, juridical, ethical, moral implications. And the advantage we have in the robotics community, we now can address this before, because as we all know, we're not there yet technologically, which in this case might even be an advantage because we can still react to that. So, yeah, well, when we realized that, well, our hope was, or this is also the reason why we came up with the idea of a foundation, because we want to actually help driving that out of a neutral point of view. So it's not connected to KUKA, I have to say, because a lot of people always ask me, it's like, oh, is this a KUKA initiative? No, it's not. It's basically right now my expensive private hobby. We came up with the foundation because we wanted to be neutral, that nobody can own it, nobody can influence it. Yeah, we have some people that agreed to donate, but those were private people that said like, okay, we want to support this. I'm also pretty open, yeah, we're lacking funding. Right now it's more or less like driven by our beliefs. Two people that helped me with that are sitting in the front row, so Sandra and Tina, and thank you for that. But on the other hand, yeah, well, if you don't start anywhere, then I think you're not gonna get anywhere. So, perfect, sorry. I hope this wasn't too long. So, Tina, we have the questions are on this next slides. How should we do? Honestly, because we are, I don't know, do we make one big group, or do we want to do this together? Do we want to split in two groups? This is actually the first question for you guys.
One big one.
One big one? And we should go for those? Yeah, I think it's still handleable. Makes sense. Yeah, okay. So, Tina, help me with what do we start? And I already get a flip chart, maybe closer to people.
Well, actually I can't see my notes, so that's kind of confusing, but I guess I can do it without them. We have actually 3 questions we wanted to ask you. The first question is, how can we involve other stakeholders like the government, the European Commission, even the customers and the public in this process? And maybe this is the one we can start with, kind of to warm up. If you have any ideas how to inform the public and also the other stakeholders and to involve them in this process. Anyone?
Oh yeah, perfect, thank you. Sorry, I didn't know who was first. So, yeah.
So I've got a question before that.
Yeah.
So you talked, sorry I missed the previous workshop, you talked there to my mind in a very abstract way.
Yeah.
In a very abstract way. I just wondered if there are any existing organisations, not for robotics, for other industries, that you might regard as a good practice model or a bad practice model.
Yes, indeed they are. What we think might be a good way to at least loom at is the UN Global Compact. They have been coming, they came up with a corporate governance model, at least the rough outline. They are very abstract, so we would like to be more down to earth, but still from a methodology, I think the UN Global Compact is a good thing to look at least from their methodology. A not so good one, but that is just my personal opinion, is the, how are they called? How is their proper name? The AI initiative that has been surfacing in the in Silicon Valley, because you know Google, Facebook, and whoever were going together, and they are putting out some. Sorry, I really have to look up the name, but why do I not like them? Because that actually is purely a lobby organization by the 3, 4, 5 big US companies. They are very short, at least from what I've seen so far. I don't want to say that this is going to change, but so far it has been very poorly researched. They don't do any research, they just put their positions out and they say like, no, AI surely is a good thing and we should do this and blah.
that is, for example, to my understanding, a bad example because they're only involving industry, they're not involving the other stakeholders, and they're not really going into what are other opinions, what are challenges, how do we approach those, and so on.
So actually the basic process, we explained this before, but of course not everybody heard it already, is that like with the UN Global Compact, we'll have this set of rules that are kind of a minimum consensus, like companies that agree to no child labor, for example. And our goal is to implement those rules, to create some kind of certification or label where companies can comply to these rules and agree them. Then of course you would have to monitor these companies to make it kind of work in practice, and then to create some kind of market mechanism so that when you inform the public about these issues, that you get this pressure from the public to comply to these rules, because otherwise you would have a competitive disadvantage. So this is the basic idea behind it. And what we want to do today is to discuss on how we could realize this in the praxis, and what is the robotic community's view on this guidelines, basically.
Sorry, I wasn't in the other session either. Can you just give a bit more detail on exactly what what you're looking to self-regulate? Because obviously there's many sort of different areas. There'd be, algorithm bias, which perhaps doesn't affect robots anyway, but at least self-explaining algorithms. There's data privacy.
Well, we're still a step before. So the Robot Manifesto is a common consensus on a minimum consensus on an ethical conduct that would be the basis for then later on self-regulation, and that would manifest in exactly those areas that you say, but there we would have to look into the different applications. So thus said, why do we believe that this works, or why there's also research showing that this is pretty promising? It's the whole thing about, you already said child labor, but it's basically opportunity costs. So the hope is that you get an image or a reflection of the public opinion on certain topics to do responsible, find a way to do responsible technology or drive innovation in a responsible way. If companies do not do that, or another example is, for example, green IT, when all the smartphone manufacturers started doing their smartphones, and Greenpeace came up with this how green is your smartphone thing, then basically in the beginning the companies didn't care, but then more and more pressure from the general public was arising, and what happened then was that it had to be put in their awareness because it was more expensive to do marketing than to do good technology, and we would like to internalize that before and come up with a common understanding that we say, okay, companies see that happening before, and are immediately investing in good means of doing technology. The step before, as I said, is just to find this, or to kick off the discussion about this common ground.
So thank you for that. That has just another clarifying question. Are you aiming it, what part of the supply chain are you aiming this at? Or are you aiming it at the whole supply chain, or just a part of it? Because obviously right from components through to end users.
The discussion is aimed at the whole robotics community. I know that this is very broad, but the manifestation might be different from different areas. So for example, if one of the common ground in the public discussion will be that we say, like, we don't do any military robotics, well, this would exclude a whole area of business, which will still happen. Then I think it has to be refined for those industries and those parts, because they're going to happen anyways, and they will presumably interpret ethical ideas differently. But I think we're more on the meta level, on the broad scale right now. Is there something that we can agree that we want not to see to happen or to see to happen, but the application. And then we had a similar discussion with Andrea Bertolini before, who was also in the session before. He said he was talking about regulation, but the same thing applies there. A lot of regulation is available, and actually we can agree on some big mechanics, mechanisms where we say, okay, this has to be regulated, that doesn't have to be regulated. Some will already fit, some don't, and in some special cases you just have to look down to the details and then adjust that accordingly. And so we're more on this big level that we right now want to say, okay, what has to be done, what doesn't have to be done, what do we touch upon, what do we not touch upon, what do we want, what don't we want. So, and again, Ellen had, I think he said he published a good overview of the ethical conducts that are currently available. So, for example, in comparison to that might also be a point of reference.
So I think we had a question there at first. And
okay, perfect, thank you.
Not the question, maybe an answer. I will try to answer that question, how to involve stakeholders. So first, as it was already mentioned, you need to really articulate the message, because depending on the message, you will choose different stakeholders. Next thing, I think we need to use already established platforms and networks in European Union, which already solve similar issues with other technologies. So to my best knowledge, there are maybe 3 such networks. One is Foresight in general, what's happening, Foresight community. Another is Responsible Research buzzword and the network concerning to it. But if we want really to have impact on regulation and on policymakers, then there is a network of so-called parliamentary technology assessment or technology assessment institutions. So I have good contacts with them and can connect you if any. And we use 2 things. One thing is there are participatory methods how to engage general lay people into the debates about the technologies. And those methods are already tested in several areas. And also how to deliver those results into policymakers' field. And also there is an office called STOA, I think, near the European Parliament, which also makes similar assessments, and recently we published reports about robotics as well, with the concerns you are raising too. So my suggestion is that we need to make an analysis what's going on, and then to use those windows to push that manifesto, because if that manifesto will be only in circulating a robotic community, it will be not impactful.
We only have one microphone.
I would even start one step further, not only draft a manifesto and then start communicating that to the stakeholder groups and networks. That's how I understood you right now. But already first identify what are the stakeholder groups we need to address. What are the concerns of the stakeholders? Look at their concerns, and then see how we can what we have to do to face those concerns, to really get them from the, because we need to, I mean, it doesn't make sense from my perspective to come up with a manifesto and then discuss it with others, maybe a rough concept, but we should involve the stakeholders groups in drafting the manifesto, to have them on board already and have their concerns taken into account and have their also agreement with that. I think it's easier if you involve them from the beginning in the process. Thank you.
So on existing initiatives, I think I should mention something which is not irrelevant in this context, which is that you may have heard rumors that the Commission is working on an initiative on AI. Those rumors are true, actually, for once, and we are bringing out something towards the end of April. And as part of that initiative, in fact, we are planning to set up a multi-stakeholder forum. We also call it an alliance, which is steered by a group of experts. So there will be a core group of experts. The call for these experts was published last Friday. So this information is all public, it's available. Lots of people know about it because we've been contacted a lot since last Friday, so over the past few days about it. And here, the idea is to have a steering group of these high-level experts, and then the whole alliance would be a bigger constellation that the steering group would get in touch with or involve. So broadly, stakeholder groups ranging from industry over academia to civil society, a very broad-ranging set of communities. And the idea would be also to have some kind of online setup to get them involved. So this call is open for 4 weeks. It will close then in early April. And the steering group, if you like, will be selected hopefully still in April, and they would start working and then involving the community from that point onwards, probably in practice very much in the summer. And they are supposed to bring, to suggest elements to the Commission for future, the future of this technology, if you like, the kinds of, if you like, strategic input on the one hand, but also to come up with ethical guidelines for us.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask you a question? So where did this idea of granting legal identity to robots came from initially?
The European Parliament Working Group in the Legal Affairs Committee.
And in their case, where that came from? Because I'm sure they were just reacting or answering to certain pressures or...
No, they were not. No, they were not. So
how this idea came in their minds?
You should ask the Parliament. So, no, seriously.
This is an important question, though. But we can trace back where the interest that pushed up this. Yeah.
So, let me just repeat. I'll let you have the microphone in a second. So, the Parliament started a working group on robotics, the Parliament Legal Affairs Committee. And they worked on and they came up with recommendations which were then adopted by the plenary of the Parliament and became a resolution. And in that work they came up with this idea. I don't know which single person is behind it, but I know that emerged from them.
And they consulted experts as well. They consulted a number of people.
So we, the Commission, we gave them information about our activities, what we have done in this field, what we are planning to do. They consulted a lot of other experts, and I don't know if it came from one of the people they consulted or if it came from the group itself. Susanne, have you got more information?
Well, as far as I know, before that working group in the Parliament was formed, and before there was a round table set up initiated by Madi Elbour, there was a presentation of the results of the RoboLaw project that has been, Claire Bertolini has been involved in that thing, and I think that was the starting point when the European Parliament then, or that working group formed. That's as far as I know, that was really the trigger to have them involved in the discussion.
So the MEP who got this started, got interested in this topic, whether that workshop was the trigger or whether she got involved in it or interested in it before, I'm not sure. But so this is, I should perhaps clarify the nature of the resolution. That is a set of recommendations from the Parliament to the Commission. It's non-binding. Okay, well then I don't do.
I know this, but my point is, look, nobody is like green this field. When European Commission decides to come up with certain, let's say, preparing, let's say, something for certain legislation, this is happening because something else happened out there, which means we know Brussels has I don't know how many hundreds of lobbyist groups. These don't come out of nothing. It's not just like someone came up with an idea and put it up there and we're discussing it. what I'm trying to ask here is, maybe there were some lobbies groups that made a certain lobby. If you don't like the word pressure, I don't know what word shall I use. Lobby activity.
So all I can say to
push with that, because otherwise, I'm trying to explain why not.
Well,
why this?
If
It's
may
an
I,
important question.
just one point. At least I know that, well, we have been thinking, we are surely not the reason, I don't want to say that, but we have been thinking about this whole domain of problems or issues since 2012. In the European robotics community here, it has been discussed at least since 2015. And 2015, it started that there were dedicated workshops at the IEEE, IROS, and ICRA events. So at least in the robotics community, the topic is starting to evolve, or has been evolving for now more than 4 years. So actually, when I hear that, the ideas that I hear, I'm actually super happy. That sounds awesome, because it's well, it is at least it's great that. Well, you put something up like that, and this is more or less what, at least from my understanding, the community has been asking for at least 3 years.
So just a final word on that. So I have no idea if there's a lobbyist behind it. I don't think that's necessarily the case. So of course you can assume that there is always some kind of an evil lobbyist behind it. May or may not be the case. I don't think you should underestimate the Parliament people who have worked on this, the MEPs and their assistants or whoever. It may well come from one of them. I simply don't know. It does not necessarily come from lobbyists. It may. I cannot immediately think of any lobbyist who would be in favor of that, to be honest. At least no one that I've talked to has been particularly strongly in favor of that. So in that sense, I'm not sure if that's the case. I simply don't know where the idea came from. So I cannot just say anything more than that at the moment. And as you know, as you said, that doesn't necessarily lead to anything.
Right. No, I'm asking because it's very important that the background against a certain idea is correct. Don't worry. I accept what you're saying, and I think the lobby shouldn't necessarily be evil. I'm just trying to understand something here from a different perspective.
So you're asking me something I cannot answer. I think I said as much as I possibly can. The rest is pure speculation, because I don't know, and I'm not working in the Parliament, so I don't know how it came and why they wanted to add it there. I mean, the justification is in the resolution. They explain briefly why they think it would be useful. A lot of people, in addition to you, have been very concerned about it. I've been contacted many times about this. Is why is there something like that? This is dangerous. This is worrying. So and so on. But I mean, I don't know where it comes from. I'd be interested to know as well, but I have no idea.
So I think we have a contribution over there as well. Thank you.
I think it can come from the report I mentioned made by STOA, and it was pure research about what technologies can have impact on the society, and robotics came up under the screening of this, and there were a lot of concerns raised how robotics in particular and artificial intelligence can have impact. And maybe then it was the response by establishing working group and so on.
Well, I think we just lost our topic focus a little bit.
Slightly.
Maybe we can just...
Getting back to the point, where and which stakeholders should be involved?
This is a global, it's just another, sorry, clarifying question.
Yes,
This is a global initiative. So you probably are going to have to bring in those AI groups. I mean, there's not just the one, I've forgotten the name as well, but there's a number of them in the US. And I mean, you haven't mentioned the IEEE. I presume you'd be thinking of them.
Oh, because actually I didn't mention any of those right now, because I just think we shouldn't put anything up here. That's what we're asking you.
Yeah.
But okay, IEEE and AI initiative.
I mean, I think basically a starting point would presumably be a kind of a survey of what is actually out there and what are they sort of focusing on, and you know, the last thing you want to do, or probably have the resources for, is to reinvent the wheel.
Yep. put that here as well. Not reinvent the wheel. Thank you. Any others? So
Yeah, you already mentioned that, but just wanna, because you try to take notes on that, is definitely the trade unions. You can probably spread the word or get information through the European representations of those trade unions, not only for the manufacturing sectors like industrial, but there's most likely the service sector trade unions also represented that we should involve, because they might be the ones that have not yet been involved in the technology but might as well be in the future, so we should keep them on board as well.
So earlier on you talked about citizens as one of the groups, so I got a couple of suggestions on that. One is that perhaps through some of the organisations that already have high levels of trust among citizens. So I'm thinking of, in the UK, it would be the Consumer Association, who look after buying. In Germany, it's Stiftung Warentest. So there's some kind of non-profit, more or less non-profit, high-trust organisations. So they may have a role in this. And the other suggestion is a practice that's used in some sectors in the healthcare sector to try and get input from the citizens. They have this concept of a lay member. So they have pick a small number, not one, but not 100, of well-respected, well-informed person who acts as a representative. And that person sometimes it'll rotate, so there's not too much capture.
okay.
So lay member, they call it.
Like this, yeah.
Yeah, lay member.
Member.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's good.
To find out about the citizens' concerns, we should also use the Eurobarometer surveys that are regularly done, because they give a good input of a broad audience of citizens in Europe about certain aspects of technology. Maybe at some point one can also, if there are certain aspects that have not yet been taken into account, we probably could also, via the EC, get into that set of questions.
Maybe very practical speaking, about 10 months, next European Week of Robotics is coming up, and we can organize some events there for the general public. I think it's in the end of November or something like that.
European Robotics Week, yeah. How about, does the media have to be addressed separately?
What would be the purpose of bringing them? I mean, the media
Not bringing them in, but more like, or at least raise awareness of the importance of not pushing populist ideas out there, and that at least there is media that you but there is media that you can talk to, and there is media that you can't. But
I wouldn't
do
say later in the process, when we have some ideas of we want, then we can talk to them.
You definitely need the media as communicator to the public.
Yeah. How about ethical bodies? And I know that at least a lot of the ethics discussion in general, so ethics in general, is still driven by the Protestant Church. I don't know how about the churches, because I know that they at least do a lot of research in that, or is that something that you have a feeling that would not be accepted? Is the input that we need? Is the input that we should drop? Is the, I don't know.
If you say Protestant, then they're all the others as well. So
that is the other, but no, because from a research point of view, it's really interesting, because especially German Protestant Church still has, so if you look at the ethics publications, basic ethics research,
a lot of that still seems to come from Germany. I was astounded by that as well, but I was really digging into that and I was like, okay, where does it come from? So the first one is really Germany, second one is South Korea, and then it's the rest of the world somehow. And it's in fundamental ethical research, not this applied ethics that, well, for example, also Ellen is doing and so on. But I didn't know that, honestly. I just dug into that some month ago. So this is exactly my question. So does that mean we have to involve all the churches or religious organizations, or just those that do research? It's an open question. I have no opinion on that.
The question is also whether they really look into the technological aspects of it. Because if it's more the general layer of ethical research, that's probably, I don't know how we
I do that they do. So you know the Denkschrift? These things. Oh, okay, the Protestant Church is issuing, so they call it Denkschrift, and they are now also translated in other languages. They go out and they discuss, for example, of job loss through technology. That caused some ripples in the ethics community because that is a very thick paper actually, but well written and well researched. It just comes from that community, but it doesn't mean that it is in any ways too much religiously influenced. But so just asking, or is that something where you would say exactly what you said? And I feel you that you say, okay, if I take those guys, then I have to take the other ones as well.
Well, thank you for clarification on the German situation. Coming from the UK, the Quakers, which is a very narrow group.
Yeah.
If you publicise what you're doing and you reach out, those groups will come to you rather than target them.
Okay.
They're aware and they're interested in it, and that's maybe what you need.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to get an opinion on that. Any others that we missed? Maybe the lawyers of this world.
We definitely missed the group, but we have the consumers of robotics. So that's either the private users, which is public, or on the other hand, professional users like the large industry applying robotics, but also like healthcare institutions, nursery homes, and all that kind of entities that are professionally using robotics, employing robotics.
So all the consumers?
It might be something that, possibly the World Economic Forum might be interested in. And you mentioned the UN, but as you know, you mentioned the UN Global Compact as a kind of a model. So, is it worth speaking to the UN?
Well, at least I personally have discussions with the UN Institute of Disarmament Research. They are very much interested in that, and they're because they were at last year's IROS, I think, or ICRA, one of the conferences. They gave a keynote presentation, and they were like they're desperately looking for robotics experts and the exchange with robotics experts. So the United Nations would be very interested.
But I'm not sure the extent to which they're focused outside of military applications.
Yeah. They have actually set up an office in The Hague, and I don't know how many staff they have, but I talked to the guy who's leading it, who's the director there. They have something there, and they are also used to it more broadly from what I understood.
Okay. Any additions? Otherwise, I think this is already pretty good on the list.
We're really kind of, we haven't considered, China, we really need to know what the equivalent organisations in China are, I think, to...
Is that just knowing, or is that involving?
Well, I think it would be first knowing, and then seeing who you could involve.
I make a look into categories, so that is China. Where else would we have to look? Sorry that I turned my back on you.
Well, Japan, from the supply perspective, Japan and Korea, of course.
Any other places? Institutions?
G7.
G7?
OECD is also discussed.
by the way, what are we going to do with that? We want to write that up in a white paper and just make it available to the community, so as a basis for the work, because, well, so we want to make it available. So, next question.
Well, in the next question, we actually want to address especially the roboticists in here and the people which are really working at robot manufacturers, and we would really like to know your view on this whole discussion and what are your fears or hopes regarding this, and also if there's like a bottom line which should be at the least the things that really should be in such a manifesto, or if there's some kinds of categories or issues you think should be really addressed or are really important. Of course, everything else can also everyone else can also participate, but well. And I think we just leave the mic, because I think everyone can hear everyone just fine without it.
Yeah, it's not such a big crowd.
So maybe first remark on that. So from my understanding, when we think about something like a robot manifesto, it's an ethical discussion that is basically a comparison of values. So what are our values concerning robotics? On the other hand, robotics is just a tool. So we're actually looking at how do we want to live in the future, how do we want to be, what is the outlook on society in the future, what do you wish for, what do you don't wish for. And now it's getting very difficult because we involve a lot of people on the stakeholders list that might have very conflicting values. Very conflicting values.
Or at least interests.
At least,
to be more neutral, at least. So interest, and then it might result in different value sets.
And of course, from a scientific point of view, I still want to do free research, of course responsible research, and we have to get into that, what that is, but I don't want to be limited in the things I want to do.
But just for the wish list, I think this is a very good point. May I put free research there?
Well, it depends what free means. It depends what free means.
Of course.
Maybe unrestricted.
No, well,
no. Responsible.
I would go the other way.
Good, please. I write what you tell me. It was just a...
No, I agree very much with the comment that you just made. So I'm a bit skeptical about, very broad statements. I mean, the UN in itself is quite a good example of how these things work or fail to work very often. So,
actually, sorry to jump in there, because you came 10 minutes late. I just said that before, that you said that in your talk, that there are some general concepts that might hold or might not, and then we then have to look in the special situations and might have to specify it more. So we I mean in general, just that you know. So.
No, but I agree that what are the values of our, so responsible research and innovation is a typical European concept. It's still quite hard to define. And I'm pretty much attached to it in the sense that I wouldn't want to see crazy things being done. So when you say I don't want to be restricted to my research, my answer as a lawyer would be depends on what you want to do. If you want to play around with human beings, I'm a little bit more skeptical about whether I would let you do that or not. They might not be as restrictive in China. One example is the experimentation of the CRISPR-Cas9, which is not robotics, but it's a very relevant issue. It all started in China. Things like that would never happen in Europe, I would say, with a current legal system. So, I think that, but I don't think you need to reach China to see substantial differences in that. So,
So I wrote responsible research, whatever that might mean.
It is a response. RRI is a quite defined concept within the EU, but again, it's a European concept. It's a European framework. It's a European way of doing things. It's not the US. It's not China. It's not Korea.
On the other hand, we had that point in our previous discussion. Maybe that would be something that the European Union should be exporting, you know, that we say like, hey, responsible research should become a thing in the world and not just in Europe.
I agree. The point is, if you want to make a broad document, you have to, that encompasses so many people, you have to renounce part of the content of the concepts, whereas another strategy is to have a document that is that refers to a more restricted group of individuals, but is more content defined, and then that becomes a model that can be exported once it is defined in its content. Whereas if you have a very broad document, you have to renounce a substantial part of the content in order to put all these people together. So if you want to have a model to export, I would make it a European model. This is.
I just put that as a side note here because I think it's a very good point. So methodology, broad versus maybe limited. So I think just as a reminder that we want to include that in the discussion. Yes?
Well, from the robot manufacturer's point of view, they would say, I'm not being a manufacturer myself, I would say they want to, of course, sell their system. And what does it need to do that is also having an acceptance, because if I have a public fear of robotics and if trade unions are opposing because the threats are seen too high, then I would just not be able to sell my system, so I have to take that into account and create acceptance for my product.
I would like to add on that, because it's a roboticist wish list, so I would love to have an informed discussion with society about robotics. Because Dominic touched on the subject, if you mention robotics, people sometimes associate Terminators with it, but we're quite far away from that. But on the other hand, I'm still a bit skeptical on the thing. Is it really a robotic manifesto? Because it includes, for example, AI and digitization, all these initiatives that are all encompassing. Is it really possible to write a manifesto for responsible use of a hammer? Probably not.
Well, I guess you could at least agree to not kill anybody with it. So that's at least the minimum consensus on how to use a hammer.
There's a common understanding how to properly use a hammer and how you use a hammer if you want to harm someone. That's not written here in stone, but there's a common understanding for that. Our value system gives that kind of understanding.
Actually, I very much like the point. Basically, you did it twice mentioning now, because to me, it's still unclear what we're aiming for. When you say what a robotic manifesto, especially, are we really talking about, as you said, the use of robots? And we're not so much looking into how we came up with a machine and what all is inside, software and so on. Or are we actually also looking on how we actually make the things, or we get the data from it we need for learning, for example, which is a different topics, and I'm still not clear what we're aiming for. And actually, I don't know what I would like to have we aim for. So even inside myself, undecided at the moment what this should come about. It's just a feeling we need to do something, but I have not figured out yet what.
Very good side note. I also put that down here as a manifesto on how to build robots versus how to use robots.
The hammer is a nice example because it's a dual-use tool. And if we are honest, pretty much everything which exists, which has good and bad news, whatever good and bad means in the relative context.
Yep. Anything to add to the wish list? Yes.
So one suggestion is to encourage transparency. So one thing that's kind of missing is where several levels. Conflicts of interest, so again, you mentioned the healthcare field. Nowadays, when you publish a paper, you're expected to declare financial interests. This wasn't the case in the past. It caused a number of issues, but it's specific to that research methodology. I think again about some industries that have gone from very low trust to very high trust. The one that comes to mind is aerospace. So having a regulator, having a database of incidents, whatever an incident is, to be able to track statistics, and for the industry, the community to say this is not acceptable, this is how we improve. If you don't know the numbers or stats, it's hard to know what things are getting better. This kind of database logging resource.
Does it make sense to put that up as a, because I just wrote it here, but then I think it's such a strong thing. Do we want to trust robotics? I would like people to, so it goes along with all that, but you have an educated discussion, as you said, with the general public. Hopefully a neutral, unbiased, educated discussion. Then you get to transparency, and that actually in the end leads to trust. Or do we say, no, this is clear out of the two other points, or should I put it here? I would love to put it here explicitly, but okay, so
you should put it here.
Especially because on the previous slide you've got education, and education is not a replacement for trust.
Yes.
You would trust me if only I educated you more.
Yes.
It doesn't work.
Or if I educate you the right way. Shh. Exactly.
Trump-style education.
How is that? 2 + 2 is 4. Yeah, exactly. So should we? Well, does education or the right way to educate, or how should we put that? Does it have a point here as well?
You had education on the previous one.
No. Or
I saw that.
Responsible research, public acceptance, educated discussion.
Yeah.
So because I just took what you said.
That's a good point, but it's not educate as a target.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else that comes to mind?
We have a common vision of how the future should look like, and which our children and grandchildren and generations after us should live in somehow. And then from that point of view, looking on how robotics could
the role of robotics
enable that or kind of destroy that. What the role of robotics is in that.
Shared vision of future of robotics, like that grasp it for us, or?
Well, that what you were saying is something more, like the future of mankind, but it's very,
that is then a bit,
but even
nearly heroic, but
yeah. No, but I think it's more about a shared vision of future society and the role of robotics in it, and not a shared vision of future robotics. It's from a terminology thing, it's a different thing.
Yeah. About the interplay between robotics and us in the end.
Yeah. How
we want to interact with machines, with data-driven machines.
Yeah.
Shared vision of the role of robotics in society.
It's just a discussion I once had on robotics in healthcare and nursing, and my concern rather was, do I want to be, if I'm in a nursing home, do I want a robot to take care of me? And the other aspect I then heard from others is, can everybody afford to have a robot? It's kind of, is it the good or the bad part of my, that's some vision we have to know, because if we have different visions on that, our ideas how we should respond to that is different.
But this is actually the model of society, right?
Yeah.
So if the society is willing to pay for it, even to not the upper 1% who can afford a robot, but also to roll it out on a broad base, then this would be a real statement for the society. even if it's a high investment.
Yeah, but the question is, do I want that? I mean, is it about affordability of robots on one hand, and is it about affordability? Can I afford a human nurse, or do I have to use a robot?
Or do I have to be packed in a care, let's say, minimalistic care facility?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it comes down to that, because that is actually, I think it's bidirectional, because if we get that view from stakeholders, I think then we have to feed it back to the robotics community, because then we can do the technology that people want to see.
One more thing which actually connects with what you just said earlier about the educated discussion. There needs to be freedom of choice if I want to actually use the technology. Today we are more or less forced to have a smartphone. So fine, I'm resisting that, but I'm not sure how long I can keep that. And this is some important thing. So if we have technology, how dependent are we on it? And can we avoid it to some degree?
Well, will I have a competitive disadvantage as a person if I do not use this technology, or if I don't have my robotic assistant, or if I... So it's more like this really, is it commonly accessible, but also then can I live without? Do I have to live without? Can I get access to it the other way around? So all these dimensions of the thing. So it's a democratization of robotics.
And this goes into another point, which is the question of, do you have something to hide? So when it comes about data protection and openness, I mean, everyone talks about privacy, at least in some communities, gets some eyebrows raised. What are you hiding? Why are you putting off all your life on the web? So this is also a kind of social thing of pressure, is not to have a disadvantage, for example, when you wear your privacy.
But shouldn't really the robotics community rather want to produce a product everyone would like to have, instead of wanting the customer to have the freedom of choice?
What I was thinking about is, when we make robots and we design what the intended use of the machine is, then we should think about these things like privacy, like freedom of choice, and so on, that we don't intentionally or unintentionally, what I guess, build a machine that is drifting in a specific direction we don't thought about before.
If I may, I just want to answer to that. I don't know, because yes, now switching my hat quickly, so Kuka hat, orange, you know. Responsible for consumer robotics, I would love to build something that actually even convinces my parents that they want to have one. What I don't want to see is that people couldn't be part of society without having to have one. And so I perfectly get your point. And so I think this is a difference. I can wish for that everybody wants to have it, but they should be able to live without it, and not like they have to think about
that is no choice, truly. I mean, this is something that simply happens because nobody ever, without anybody ever choosing to do that. It's not that you get there because it's not that somebody chose that we have to have and use emails. You know, it's something that just happened. And nowadays you cannot live without having emails. And unfortunately, there are choices that are made not fully aware way that are irreversible, but also very hard, if not to say impossible, to manage. You know, if you create the smartphone, actually, if you create BlackBerry, you know. And then it's inevitable that people get used to the fact that they can reach you with their emails anywhere, and that you start working everywhere in the world you find yourself, on whatever matter. You know, so these things change the behavior of people without anybody having really decided or planned that out. So you cannot say I want to design a product that will be desired by many but won't be a need, because that is not for you to decide. I mean, you can have the best intention in the world, but how things play out is completely outside of your control.
Okay, you're right, but does it change if I say I have the best intention and it still happens, or I already have the mean intention that I say I want to come up with something that nobody can live without? They just being advocatus diaboli here, you know?
What I'm trying to say is slightly different because, you know, intentions matter. I'm very serious about intentions, but intention is one thing, wishful thinking is another thing. What I'm trying to say is that, you know, this is also a concept, a very relevant concept in criminal law, you know. If you say, okay, I set fire to this, so I drive like crazy in the city center of Tampere because I feel that I'm the new Schumacher, and then I hit someone, but that wasn't my intention because I thought I was the new Schumacher. So that really, you know, even if it was my true, honest, and heartfelt intention, that would make a difference from a legal point of view. So this is what the kind of reasoning that I'm trying to put forward. I don't think that, unfortunately, technology there is this very nice book by Mark Zuckerberg that says human beings, entitled human being at risk. And the fundamental idea is that technology does not eliminate vulnerabilities, it just changes the kind of vulnerabilities we have. So we were vulnerable when we didn't have emails because we weren't, it would be hard, it was harder then to reach someone or to work with someone, work was slower. We have emails, you're not vulnerable in that sense, you're vulnerable in another way. So,
yeah, so we replaced one of the vulnerabilities. Yeah.
So I'm afraid there's nothing to do with that.
I think if we want to create trust, we have to make sure that we want to bring a product in the market that we already have. I mean, you can still live without emails. Maybe not in your job, and not in my job, and not in his job, but you can live without emails. It's still working in our society, and it should be your freedom to decide on that, whether you're using that or not. And there should be kind of, if you exclude people from society because they can't use the technology or they don't want to use the technology.
No, it's not that you exclude, you exclude yourself if you decide to. I mean, there is a guy in Italy.
That's wrong.
Well, it's not wrong. It's as it, you know, there's, I mean, if as you said, you cannot have my job, you can have your job, you cannot work for the commission if you decide not to have emails. So you're excluding yourself through your free decision. Nobody is saying that, but you're excluding yourself with your free decision from a lot of social interactions. And if you were analytical about that, you would exclude yourself from so many interactions. And there are a few people that decide to live without internet nowadays, but I mean, 99% of the jobs they cannot do, and in the future it will be even worse. You know, we're talking about Internet of Things. You know, imagine you say, okay, I want to live an internet-free life. You can do that. Go on the mountains and raise cows. You know, and probably the moment will come when you won't be able to do that anymore. Well,
even there on GPS trackers.
Yeah.
But I just put it here also as a side note, intention, vulnerabilities, and decisions. So this, actually it's more like a triangle because they are intertwined. So to think about that, although we don't have a solution for it. Okay, any additions to the list?
Of course, what I'm still missing is a clear discussion on values. So what is the shared vision? We already touched on that, but this is a centerpiece of the whole discussion. Where are we heading to? Are we heading for a neoliberal utopia where everyone wants to maximize profits, or are we aiming for a utopia, more post-scarcity society, and that changes a lot on a manifesto like that. So a clear discussion on values is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, it's just a very general document that kind of sums up a couple of best practices, what you should do, for example, in research and product development, and what is kind of a bad idea to do. And this is actually where I think also most of the conflicts in the discussion will arise, when we really put values on the table and see I want society to head in this direction.
I just wonder if a guideline would still be a useful thing to have. I agree with what you're saying, especially if it's trying to merge a Western tradition with a process of other countries. But I wonder, some of that may actually come from outside. So I'm thinking back at a plenary session where the guy from Pilz saying we should fund films. Some of the horrors that come to mind in the public mind about robots are Terminator, Frankenstein, or they're things that are actually cultural, artistic creation. So the initiative should maybe fund films, but those people, the ideas that come from that creative group are very valuable in this. So that creates our shared values. And the experience in Japan, from what I understand, is naive to that, and therefore more open. So that's an important point, but I don't know how we fit it in this slide.
I just put communication here, because I fully agree, because this is something, the Hollywood effect is giving us a lot of headaches. And actually there are nice papers about that, about studies how people get influenced by Hollywood, but it starts with our opinion towards relationships and goes into technology and all that. The question is, how would that be, I don't dare to say influenced, but maybe it should be. Maybe it should be exactly the other way around. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Well, I think that is related to the informed discussion with, the educated discussion with society, of course, how to get people informed about it. But I just wanted to go back to the shared values once more, because if we come up with some guidelines, we have to attach these values to them and tell people, we think this is the best kind of behavior, because we're talking about expected behavior when we're talking ethics, and this is why this is linked to this kind of value. Otherwise, it's not really plausible for someone who is not an expert on this technology, because at least I'm expecting it's a bit more technological driven, what we're working on, at least in this kind of environment.
I see a huge problem with scope. So having a global manifesto rather than a European one, but then on the other hand, sounds good, sounds pretty great to have, but on the other hand, if you look at the values, like look at data protection and look at the acceptance of robotics in different cultures, I see a huge problem to find a common ground.
Even more if we start talking about human dignity.
I think it probably makes sense to look for other parts of the world discussing, if they discuss the topic, before you aim for European version of the manifesto as a first exercise. And if we manage to come up with something which sounds reasonable, we can still think how we broaden it up if we want. But if we try to solve the problem of the world, it will go nowhere.
But then you're going to have to think about the supply chain, because the supply, you know, I can't imagine that if you're going to take the whole supply chain, which is what you said you were thinking of, I can't imagine one of those supply chains that would just be European.
Yeah.
I mean, and even if it is now, it isn't going to be, you know, once you get more AI in it.
I also see critical to have a big scope beyond Europe, because when I think on weapons, and the core of a weapon to harm or to threat, and if you ask an American to forbid weapons and guns, the answer will be completely different compared to, I guess, if you ask a German. And so I don't know if it's possible to have a global scope.
So
I'm not sure.
Responding to your point, I think we can still have a European, or start with a European manifesto on responsible use of robotics or sustainable development of robotics, and manufacturers are part of the value chain that are based outside Europe can still say, okay, when we work on the European continent, we accept those values, and some products we deliver here should adhere to those values.
Or you could even start exporting those, and again, sorry, switching my head again, orange. KUKA, for example, says we're applying German safety regulation in where we ship our robots. So this is even if we ship to another country that has weaker regulation, we at least enforce those, at least with our products. Solution is something different, they can do whatever they want. But so with our products, we stick to the German standards. And that might be something, if you have such a European manifesto and you're committed to that, then you say more or less like, okay, then we export it with our products. So, okay, sorry, switching to my blue hat again.
I'm not sure how well that will work with values, though. I mean, I think it works, you know, for technical standards. If you're basically what you're saying is you're taking kind of what you would consider to be the highest common denominator, because you know you're not going to get into trouble in countries where the denominator is lower. But I don't see how that would work.
Oh no, with us it's just, we're just, sorry again, switching. KUKA is convinced of that, and it was just a decision, because we had the discussion and said, but for other countries we don't have to do that. And then we're still like, yes, but we want to do that, and we hope that from bottom up, we're influencing the regulation in those countries because we believe in safe robotics. That was really a strategic decision. So it was not, it would be easier and maybe in some cases cheaper and higher margin to do differently. But so just commenting, I could imagine that might be, there might be companies that want to do it.
I think it might even be a challenge to formulate values that you can, that everybody can agree to. Because I think, I would say I would like my children and grandchildren living in a safe environment. But maybe for Americans, a safe environment and neighborhood means that everybody can possess a weapon to defend himself against theft or something like that. And maybe for people in European countries, a safe environment means not having, or only a certain people should be allowed to own any kind of potentially harmful things.
I think that's part of the scope discussion we're currently having. Another dimension of that is also, what are we aiming for? Are we aiming for a minimal set of guidelines, or are we aiming for a kind of something we aim for towards in a best case scenario? Especially when we're talking about a manifesto, it's usually a kind of utopia you're aiming at.
Best case, so yeah, so we would like to see that, and if we don't, we miss it by 10%, then yes, I think this is a very good point. So I'm very sorry, but if I'm correct, I think we're mostly done, or are we done? Yeah. So as I first of all, unfortunately I have to skip it here or cut it here, but thank you for all the contributions, and thank you for showing up at the last workshop, basically, and so many of you, and staying till the end. Thanks for the great discussion. We gonna take all this and think about it, put it under our pillow and sleep over it for some nights. Then we're gonna write it together and we're gonna distribute it. I think you said it, or I don't know who said, yeah, I think you said it, but I just wrote that down because I like the idea of a European Manifesto for Responsible Robotics. And sorry, the marketing guy came through, but I don't know if that is something that we might want to look into it, but at least I see that there is I think we had a good discussion about it. It was a very high-level discussion, I'm very aware of that. I would love to continue that, and so we're going to write it up. Well, thanks for joining. If you want to contribute further, or if you have any ideas, or you go home and tomorrow morning in the bathtub you say, oh my God, this would be something that we have to add, please go for it. We're also thinking that at the robotic governance website, for a long time I wanted to install a forum or an area where we can discuss these things, so that it should be open and transparent, as we already said. So thank you for your contributions, and I don't know if somebody wants one. I also brought some patches if you want. But anyways, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us at the ERF. Hope you had a great time, and hope to hear and see you before Bucharest. Thank you.
And thanks Tina and Sandra for all the help and for all the contributions.
Cool.